Country Life on Midlands 103. Brought to you by W. Orshaw, Burlington Business Park, Tullamore. Supplier of New Holland's tractors in the Midlands. worshaw.ie.
Good evening and welcome to Country Life here in Midlands 103. MJ Clery with you until 8 p.m. this evening, bringing you the latest from the Midlands and further afield from the worlds of food, farming and agri-business. It is the 4th of March and the start of spring officially, and thankfully a little bit of spring weather over the last few days. Good drying. Now, it's been up and down, but still good drying for a couple of days. Lots and lots of slurry being sprayed the last few days, and super to get a chance to do it. So more of the same for the coming days is what we are after. Now, the programme this evening, in a moment, Phelim O'Neill from the Farmers Journal joins me to give an update on what's occurring in the Middle East. Also this evening, next week sees the biggest week of the National Hunt racing calendar, with the Cheltenham Festival starting on Tuesday and running to Friday. Mark Costello is editor of the Irish Field, the famous racing newspaper, which is on the go over 100 years now at this stage, and he will mark your card ahead of the event next week. So hopefully a couple of good each way shouts there, and we'll fill the coffers with paddies there around the corner. Fishing is something I don't think I've ever covered here on the programme over all the years, but itself and farming have always had a natural synergy. But as quotas left us in farming some years back, they are still a huge part of the fishing industry. And with these quotas diminishing year on year, it's becoming harder and harder to make a living as a fisherman. Dominic Rehan from the Killybegs Fishermen's Organisation is going to give us an insight into just how tough the fishing industry is becoming and the supports they are calling for from the government. The River Barrow here in the Midlands has been identified as a priority catchment, and an action plan was launched today. Kieran Sheehan from Teagasc will join me later to give particulars on that. Of course, water quality being pertinent to all farmers now, so important for us to maintain our derogation going forward. We won't feel those few years up, and we'll be calling for it again. So water quality is the big one, and we'll be going through the 8 actions which each farmer can take to ensure water quality is maintained in their vicinity. Now, text me or WhatsApp me 083 30 10 103. Be happy to bring to our guests this evening. As I said from the outset, Phelim from the Farmers Journal is joining me. Phelim O'Neill, many thanks for taking my call this evening.
Good evening, MJ.
Phelim, conflict has started in the Middle East, and look, we're going to talk about it in a moment, but I suppose it is important to caveat it, Phelim. We're going to look at it from a supply perspective, and we're looking fertiliser, oil and the knock-on effect, but we have to deal with it with kid gloves, I suppose. Look, in reality, we're looking at the screens and looking at our phones, looking at the news, and we're seeing bombs being dropped, but real people are there. I know we disassociate it a little when you see it on the screen, but real people are getting injured and much, much worse. So it's a hard one to balance and a hard one to speak about, really.
Oh, absolutely, MJ. And I suppose first and foremost, our thoughts are with the people that are tied up in the middle of this. And indeed, in many ways, there's a terrible feeling of deja vu about this, because it was just this time 4 years ago that the conflict started in Ukraine with Russia invading there. And it just seems to be a repeat of that exercise, and whatever the rights and wrongs of the conflict and the reasons for the conflict, I suppose are beyond my brief as an agriculture journalist with the Farmers Journal. But look, I don't think anyone that has any human feelings at all can avoid just the trauma that the whole thing is for the people that are in the middle of it.
Yeah, and unfortunately then, Phil, look, the realities then of this is going to have a knock-on effect on farming and agriculture here in Europe and indeed Ireland. Look, we need fertiliser to grow grass, we need diesel for tillage crops coming up, for feeding cattle, for you name it, for everyday workings on the farm. So everything is going to have kerosene needed to heat farmhouses up and down the country as well. Everything's going to have a knock-on effect. And I see your headline on tomorrow's Farmers Journal is War Sparks Fertiliser Trade Chaos. So there's a lot of different aspects here that are going to be impinged.
So West, we in Ireland may feel a lot. The reality is that they will impact on us indirectly through our farms and through our everyday lives, and that'll apply for every citizen, because the longer this type of conflict goes on, the more of it has general inflation across the piece. But immediately, I suppose the one that will be of interest to your listeners and our readers in the Farmers Journal is the fact that the first place that we see this hit is in fertiliser prices. Now, why is that? The reason, put quite simply, is that the key ingredient, the key component in the manufacture of fertiliser is liquid gas. And one of the key sources of supply for that, previously the key source of supply for that was Russia, of course, and that was why we had such a disruption to the market back in 2022 when that conflict started. We now would focus primarily on the Middle East for that. The reality is that the shipping lanes have been disrupted there. The supplies are, either severely reduced or severely hampered or not getting out at all. And that means that supply availability for later in the year is definitely put at risk and immediately pushed to serious inflation. We have, as things stand for, I suppose, the immediate first sowing of fertiliser in 2026, we're not in the worst place because at the end of last year, with the CBAM tax coming in, that's the carbon adjustment abatement payment for fertiliser that was coming into the European Union from outside, it meant that there was a good stockpile built up ahead of the year end in 2025. So the merchant yards were reasonably full, and of course that would have been sold ahead largely to farmers that had their first sowing for this year bought. So in terms of the immediate impact, many people will get away okay, but if you're looking to buy fertiliser today, well, then it's going to, if you get a price quoted at all, which might be doubtful because there's such as the level of uncertainty, many merchants will be holding back and many costs will be holding back on it. But if you were to get quoted at all, you're looking at, in terms of protected urea, one of the prices we got was $660 a tonne, $440 on can, and those are by no means stable. But, the thing is, the big issue is then, is the duration of this. If it's over within a matter of days, well then the thinking is that the industry will revert, that the disruption will be minimal, if you like, and things should return to normal. But as we see in Ukraine, that has now gone on into the fifth year. If this gets into a prolonged conflict and shipping lanes out of the Middle East are disrupted, well then the consequences are indeed horrendous for what it'll do to fertiliser prices.
Yeah, fertiliser obviously are big one this time of the year, Phelan, but also just scrolling today and looking social media, people in a bit of a panic in relation to be it petrol or diesel. Obviously, back in Ireland in the 70s, I believe, there was a fuel crisis as a result of a conflict out in the Middle East, and people are wondering about this. Obviously, look, we don't know, as you say, how long will this last, but presumably sooner rather than later, we don't keep huge stocks of these on shore.
No, we don't. We would have very, very limited storage facilities in Ireland, and that's something that has been often a point of discussion, shall we say, from the environmental point of view, where they're looking for the generation of green energy and not for an investment in fossil fuel type storage. But aside from that debate, the bottom line is we don't have huge storage capacity in Ireland, that we very much operate on a sort of a as required basis for ordering. But we will be again, as it is the case with fertiliser, we will have short-term disruption, and there is an element amongst people, whether it's home heating oil, whether it's filling up the car at the pumps, there is an element of that takes place. And as we see fuel price by 5 and 10 a litre and head closer to the €2 a litre point again, then there is an element of panic buying. How long that lasts or what the duration of that is, we simply don't know. I suppose this type of conflict, it may last a short time, and there's certainly been, sporadic outbursts of years that have lasted and finished within a matter of days. Others have gone on for a much more prolonged period. So it is a really uncertain situation that we find ourselves in at the minute.
Yeah, well, we can't say much more on it, Phelan, to be honest. Thanks for joining me and giving us that little overview, and hopefully, as we say, it will come to an end far, far sooner rather than later. Many thanks, Phelan.
Thanks to you, MJ.
Phil O'Neill there from the Farmers Journal, and we have to be cognizant, as we said, on that. Just apologies for the reception. Phelan was up and down a little bit there. He's up in Northern Ireland, and I was just struggling to get him on his UK landline there. But as we say, hopefully, look, it comes to an end sooner rather than later, far sooner, in relation to the human cost of war. And our heart goes out to people who are involved in that, especially the innocent people who are just there trying to live their lives. I've seen Dubai as well, awful lot of Irish people stuck out there, can't get home. Twice I've heard in the last couple of days, a lorry driver in somewhere the day before yesterday, he was stuck there. I heard somebody saying it, and today I heard it being said again. So hopefully everyone gets home safe and sound. As we said, the front page of the Journal for tomorrow says war sparks fertiliser trade chaos. So fertiliser sales have been paused or restricted due to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, and that is where we are on that. Now, we're going to go to a break, but before we do, have to give a mention to the end of the saga, I suppose is the word, between the IFA and Board B. Thankfully, we don't have to report on it this evening, because we did for 5 Wednesdays in a row. So Monday evening saw the stalemate come to an end, and an agreement has been reached. Quite straightforward, really. There's going to be a committee on governance set up. It's going to run for about 7 weeks, up to the end of April. Larry Murren's going to step aside. He's not going to be chair for that. And then they're going to come with a conclusion, if you will, in relation to it all. And as a result of that, the protest has stood down, and the IFA 5, the 5 members of the IFA who have been in, who were, I should say, use the past tense, were in Borbia headquarters there for, was it 25, 27 days, something like that. I'm open to correction on it. Thankfully, they got to go home. I felt more sorry for them than anybody, to be honest. What a tough stint that was, being away from family and farm. So they went back to their homes on Monday evening, and hopefully this can just be ironed out now and we can get back to normal. The IFA want to get back to the issues at hand, like the fertiliser prices, cap negotiations, you name it. I saw the press release today saying they're looking forward to getting back to the day job, and aren't we all, as opposed to reporting on it on a daily basis. So hopefully the committee comes to a satisfactory conclusion and we can move on. Now, coming up after the break, we are going to turn our attention to horse racing. Cheltenham is taking place next week. Mark Costello, he's from Nina in County Tipperary. He's the editor of the Irish Field. He's going to mark your card. So get a pen out and take these down. And Mark is going to give us, he told me earlier on, he has a couple of surefire winners for next week. So stay tuned, you're going to hear what they are.
Country Life on Midlands 103.
With W.R. Shaw, family owned and serving the Midlands since 1982, we're Ireland's largest independent agri-dealer, specialising in New Holland tractors and parts. With over 40 years' experience, we provide top quality sales, service and support. Visit W.R. Shaw in Tullamore and Carlow, or online at wrshaw.ie.
And you're very welcome back to Country Life here in Midlands 103. Now, horse racing is what we have on the menu for the next few moments, and we have Mark Costello. He's the editor of the Irish Field. Mark, many thanks for taking my call this evening here on the programme.
Good evening, how are you?
Good, Mark. We're going to get into Cheltenham shortly. Now, I said before the break to our listeners here, you have a couple of surefire winners for us for next week, so you can't let us down. No such thing when it comes to tipping horses, but we might get your thoughts on a couple of the races in a few moments. But firstly, look, it's equine related. Press release here from the Department of Agriculture earlier in the week, where Minister Hayden and his Northern Ireland counterpart, they welcome an all-Ireland approach to equine traceability. What's this about, Mark?
Well, since 2020, anyone applying for an equine passport in Ireland has had to quote an equine premises number. Now, the passports aren't issued by the department, but by breeding societies like Connemara Pony Society. Horse Sport Ireland would issue them for all the sport horses, and Weatherby's do it for thoroughbreds, done it for a couple of hundred years. And there's lots of other smaller breeding books, not all run to the same standard. So it's more, it's not something that's really enforced by the department. Now, Northern Ireland has introduced a requirement as well for horse owners in the north now to quote an equine establishment number. And they're only doing this now when applying for a passport. Now, again, you're not getting the passport from the Department of Agriculture in the north. You're getting it from the Northern Ireland Horse Board or maybe the Show Jumping Association of Ireland. So it's a step in the right direction, but there's still loopholes there. we haven't really seen many meaningful successful prosecutions for passport forgeries in Ireland, and unfortunately that is a problem in the horse sector, much more so than they should be.
Yeah, so I presume horses were going across the border under the radar and off they went, and this is to ensure that doesn't occur or to try and curtail it?
Well, the best way to explain it was there was an RT Investigates programme a couple of years ago. A lot of your listeners might remember that. You might remember the main thrust of the programme was around alleged equine welfare abuse in an abattoir in Strafford. And now those people were only fined €5,000 for having fraudulent passports. They were putting horses into the food chain who might well have had injections and medicines under their previous identity, which would make them unsafe for human consumption. There are other investigations said to be ongoing, but it wasn't a massive prosecution. But another part of that programme was all about the trade of unwanted horses abroad. Now, there are dealers, many of them are very respectable, going around the country collecting unwanted surplus horses of all breeds, and they pay cash for them. Those horses are shipped abroad, possibly through Northern Ireland, to be sold as leisure horses on the continent. And RTE found that some of those horses were in poor condition and they weren't suitable for leisure riding, and they named and shamed some Irish trainers who should have known better. They should have had their unwanted horses put down at home and don't take a chance of selling them on, not knowing whether they'll end up. So that was a real warning to horse owners here. You were responsible for this animal's welfare. It'll be traced back to you if you don't do the right thing. But now there's no abattoir here. It was closed down. That was the last one in Ireland, the last equine abattoir. So some people just can't bring themselves to put down a horse, or maybe they can't afford to have a vet do it. So we know that the dealers are still operating. And I'm not demonising the dealers. I know one or two of them. I had to explain to them that the Irish Field can't let them advertise anymore. So I assume they have their own network or they're posting on social media and they're still collecting horses, and maybe some of them end up in good homes, but more of them don't. So as I said, equine traceability is not the same as bovine. You can buy or sell horses at fairs around the country here. It's a cultural thing. The guards aren't going to get involved in stopping that. And one more thing that your listeners will be aware of, you'll have seen in the news recently reports of sulky racing around Dublin suburbs, some terrible treatment of horses, and that definitely embarrassed the minister in the Dáil. But again, the guards or the department aren't going to seize those horses. But we need to see some enforcement of the laws there. And I'd say that's what's behind some of the press releases from the department at the moment. And fair play to Martin Haley, he does do a good lot, and he knows an awful lot about the equine sector. But he's definitely, I say, trying to show people that he's doing what he can to try and improve equine traceability.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, Minister Hayden, they're obviously from County Kildare, the home of horse racing in Ireland. So he's trying to look after his voters, ensuring that he's working in their industry. And talking about that industry, Minister Hayden often alludes to it. He says it's an industry, it's not a sport. And this is Cheltenham next week. It's the showcase event for horse racing, for National Hunt horse racing for Ireland, the UK, look, indeed the world really. And it is an industry. It's a massive, massive industry. Mark, just how much are we talking about? How much does it bring into the Irish economy over the course of the year, and how big is it?
Well, the Horse Racing Ireland, which would be a subsidiary of the Department of Agriculture, often do these economic impact reports to try and help their case when they go into the department looking for an increased grant. And they say that the thoroughbred industry alone is worth $2 billion a year to the Irish economy. I've just done a few calculations myself on the back of a cigarette packet, if you like. There's 10,000 horses in training, race horses in training in Ireland every year, and it costs 25 grand a year to train a horse. That's €250 million being spent by racehorse owners before they even put a shoe on a horse or enter it for a race. And there's a huge amount of foreign investment, of course. There's a lot of sheikhs in the Middle East. There's a lot of Americans with horses in Ireland. The government, the public sales, the horses that are sold at Goffs and Tattersalls every year, they amounted to 225 million last year. Private sales would be probably as much again. So yeah, it is a massive, massive industry. You couldn't call it a sport here. There's 30,000 people employed in it, probably another 5 or 10,000 in the sport horse side. I only really know the thoroughbred side, because that's really where all the money is in. It's very close to farming here. And in fairness, the department treated as a farming, as much as they would do any other part of farming. The equine farmers are now eligible to get grants like TAMS and things like that. And the horse producers are seen now as farmers. They used to be seen more as service industry because they weren't producing food, but that has changed in recent years.
Yeah, breeding is especially synonymous with farming. Mark, you'd often see, be it dairy or beef farmers, and they have a couple of horses on the side, and that's sometimes they go on to point of points and they go on to national hunt, and they go on to great things, and that's where some of these big superstars come from, just small holdings across Ireland.
They do now. There's no point in sugarcoating it. Like, you don't get many of those stories anymore. Do you remember maybe 20 years ago the likes of Giannoli, a small trainer like Tom Foley and Carlo, or there's probably a few in the Midlands as well who would have thrown up great horses. And even the local point of points. When I started covering point of points 30 years ago, all the local point of points would have a local hunt race, a farmers race, and there'd be great competition for that cup. But that's all but gone now, because breeding and training and racing a racehorse is very expensive. It's gone professional. So at your local point to point now, the 6 races are likely to be run by horses trained professionally in Wexford, Tipperary, Limerick, Cork. These are professional yards, lads that don't want to compete with Willie Mullins on the racetrack. So they've made the point to points their niche, and they will like to win a point to point and sell it to the highest bid. And it's a thriving industry for a lot of people, though the local hunts that organise the point to points must sometimes be wondering why they bother putting on the point to points when they don't really have anything to compete in them. But they can be a good earner for a hunt even still. But it's hard work, because the insurance is high, and if it rains, you're called off. But there still is a strong link between farming and the hunts and racing, definitely.
We see a lot of horses being brought in from France, especially over the last number of years in national hunt. But I suppose back to the farming link, are we still seeing some horses bred on farms? Or they may not be brought on and trained, and they're brought up by very wealthy individuals as they succeed. But from the breeding perspective, is there still an element of farmers making some money in that respect?
Yeah, there is indeed. I mean, a good friend of mine now, William Kennedy from Nina in Tipperary, he's a big dairy farmer, but he also keeps some mares as well. And he bred a horse called Essie Diamond, and he raced it himself. It won a small race in Limerick, and he sold it for 320,000 to Willie Mullins, and the horse went on to win several million for the Dunstores family. So, that was a great story. He has more of the family at home breeding, so everybody was a winner in a story like that. But as I said, I think a lot of small farmers have probably got out of fewer of them have horse on their farm these days, because it has become more expensive, and to do things right and to compete generally at a race meeting or even at the sales to have the horse better turned out, you need to have the horse looked after by a professional consignor to bring it to the sales and have it looking $1 million at the sales as well. So the amateur element is kind of gone out of it, because Ireland has such a good reputation now. It's become very, very professional. I would think, just to be honest with you, there's not as many. You would sometimes see certainly, there's lots of syndicates and things, and the big agricultural element of those syndicates around the country in every county, but not as many of fairy tale successes now of a farmer training a horse to win at Kilbeggan or Ballinrobe or anywhere like that. They'll usually send the horse, if it's any good, it'll find its way into one of the elite yards pretty quickly, which is probably the right thing, because those guys are the best in the business, and they'll maximise the horse's value. Yeah.
Well, I suppose the cream rises to the top, and the money will always dictate where these horses will end up. Mark, next week is the Cheltenham Festival, and now we're looking for you to mark our card a little bit. Is it going to be Willie Mullins all week long again? Does Gordon Elliott have a chance? What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, Gordon Elliott has had a great season. So Gordon Elliott's training in Meath, and he's often finished. He's finished second to Willie Mullins in the Trainers' Championship here, probably 7 or 8 times at least. And he has a very strong stable now. He's very well, strongly supported by Ryanair's Michael O'Leary, and he has a very, very strong team of horses going over to Cheltenham. I'd expect him to have 5 or 6 winners. Willie Mullins normally has 8 or 9, or sometimes he's had 10 winners. He isn't having as good a season this year, still unbelievable by anybody else's standards, but he might come back a little bit. He doesn't have as many certainties this year. His stable had a little bit of a blip around Christmas, and he doesn't have any hot favourites next week. So while he's sending over probably 75 horses to Cheltenham for the 28 races, you couldn't really say for sure that he's got 2 or 3 definites in the bag already. I'm sure he'll win a handful of races again, but it's wide open. That's probably the big story this year. The races are much more open than they seem to have been in recent years. And one of the reasons for that could be because of the extreme weather conditions we've had in recent months. A lot of the races have been run on very, very heavy ground in Leopardstown, in Navan, in Corn Park. Barely, sometimes being cancelled, sometimes only just barely going ahead. And as a result, some horses, there's been a lot of shocks, and you couldn't guarantee now that the weather is drying out and the ground is drying out, you wouldn't be sure that those form lines will stand up next week. You could see a total reversal of what we've seen all winter under different conditions next week. So some good advice to punters next week would be definitely to start backing outsiders. Don't go mad on favourites, because it just seems that we're in for a real week of shocks.
And I'm going to have to hold you now, Mark. You're going to have to give us a tip before you go. Something you're sweet on for next week.
Well, I'll give you two. One, at the very first race, Joseph O'Brien, who's Aidan O'Brien's son. Joseph O'Brien trains in Pilltown, County Kilkenny. I was in his yard Monday morning, and there's a lot of confidence behind a horse called Talk the Talk. He's 5-1, the first race on Tuesday. He's managed to win in the heavy ground, but he doesn't really like it, so he's even better under different conditions at Cheltenham. And I was looking through the rest of the race to see could I find any horse with a kind of a farming connection. And the best I could come up with, MJ, was a horse called, I think it reminded me of the Board B controversy, a horse called Back Me or Sack Me. So he runs in the last race on Tuesday, and he's trained by Willie Mullins' nephew, Emmett Mullins, who's an extremely good trainer. And he's had a few Cheltenham winners already. So I'll stick with the two on Tuesday. The first race, Talk the Talk, which I'm doing now. And then and the last race, Back Me or Sack Me. And none of them back me, and I won't be back next year.
Mark, we're going to say many thanks. We're not going to put our houses on either of them, but we might throw something on them for a little bit of interest. Really good piece there, I have to say, Mark. Very, very interesting. Hopefully we have a return on either of those, but if we don't, we'll still have you back next year. Mark, many thanks for taking my call this evening.
Thank you.
Mark Costello there, editor of The Irish Field. And the Cheltenham Festival takes place from Tuesday through to Friday. Virgin Media have it now. Obviously was on Channel 4 for years and years and years. Then it changed around. So there are the two tips. Supreme Novices Hurdle, Joseph O'Brien, Talk the Talk, 5-1. That's where an each way chance. And then Back Me or Sack Me in the last race on Tuesday. Must try and check the odds of that before we finish here this evening. Now, after the break, we're going to move on to fishing and to the plight of fishermen as a result of quotas. We have a man from County Donegal, Dominic Rehan. He's going to take our call in just a moment, so stay tuned.
Country Life on Midlands 103.
Brought to you by W.R. Shaw, where New Holland isn't just a brand, it's our passion. For over 40 years, we've been Ireland's trusted name for New Holland tractors, parts and farm machinery. Whether you need new, used or ex-hire tractors, we've got you covered. wrshaw.ie.
And you're very welcome back to Country Life here on Midlands 103. Now, as I said before the break, we are moving across to the topic of fishing. We've Dominic Rehan. He's from the Killybegs Fishermen's Organisation. He's joining me all the way from Copenhagen this evening. Dominic, many thanks for taking my call this evening.
Thanks, MJ. Good to hear from you.
More than welcome, Dominic. Before we get going this evening, look, Midlands 103 is our station here. Dominic, you're a little bit far away from home, so to speak, not because you're out on the continent, but because you're speaking to us down here, Lee Shoffley, Westmeath, landlocked. We don't know much about fishing, so you're going to have to break it down for us this evening and take us by the hand as if we're a small child. But there is a natural synergy, if you will, between fishing and farming. Quotas obviously left us in dairy farming a number of years ago, and we've gone on from strength to strength and a massive industry now. Unfortunately, they're still heavily involved in fishing and making life as a fisherman quite difficult. Let's just go back to the start, if we will, if we're talking about being a fisherman and making a living from it. Fishing families, does anybody get into the industry from scratch anymore? Is it all generational?
It's all very much generational, yeah. I mean, we're seeing a very small influx these days, mainly from families, sons, grandsons, whatever else. It's hard to attract young people into the industry, just simply for the fact that fishing before was always seen as an industry that it was boom and bust, but now it's more bust than boom, I'm afraid to say. We're hemorrhaged. We've hemorrhaged a lot of quota at a European level, some due to overfishing the stocks by others and by ourselves at times, I have to be honest, but also from Brexit, which was an absolute disaster for us. So the attraction really isn't there. It's a difficult business. It's obviously challenging to work at sea. In saying that, the vessels that we do have left in the fleet now are much more modern vessels, all the comforts. But it's still a difficult environment to work. So it's not an easy industry, and it's not easy to get people into it.
Yeah, so let's talk about, I suppose, look, the barriers to entry as an industry, if you will, and we'll crack on to quotas then in a moment. But if we're looking at farming and we're drawing a line between fishing and farming, obviously land is the big issue if you want to get into farming or you want to farm or make a living from it. So I'm presuming your trawler is your biggest barrier to entry as a fisherman. Well, obviously having the skill set to fish as well, but just talking about cost, these boats that head out for, I think a lot of your members are mackerel fishermen. These boats, what are we talking about cost to get one that can go and fish mackerel and come back with a haul?
Well, typically the vessels that my members own, you're talking the region these days of around 20-25 million of an investment to get in. Now, that's just to purely buy the boat. From there, you have to buy into the license. The license is linked to the tonnage of the vessel, but also the engine power of the vessel. That has a price on the market. So it's almost like it's like an entry fee, shall we say, to even begin. So typically, for any of our boats, for someone new to get into what we do. As a producer organisation, in terms of mackerel, you're talking an investment of 40 million.
Right.
Now, that being said, the rewards are good in terms of catches, or have been in the past, but it is expensive to get in. There's a big outlay to get in.
Yeah, and I presume that the generational fishing families, obviously, look, they're going to have a trawler to trade in. It's not going to be as much of a cost, but it's still, we're talking big money. We're talking millions here. Let's talk about mackerel and the catch. The logistics of this. So a crew, they leave Killybegs. How long do they spend at sea? How much is the typical catch? And then how much can they sell it for?
Well, I'll maybe just give you a perspective of where we are and where we've been. So in 2015, typically some of our members would have had around 4,000 tonnes of mackerel to catch. That fish would have been valued at around 5, 6, 7 million. Typically, we're taking about 25, 30 days to catch. So, good return from what you do. However, in 2026, we're looking at, we're down to those boats typically have 400, 500, 600 tonnes of mackerel to catch. They can catch that in 1-2 hauls over 2 or 3 days. And that's their mackerel season finished. Now, obviously, the market demand is very strong for mackerel. It's wanted all over the world. But they are looking at probably a reduction in their earnings of 3 to 4 million of where they were 10 years ago. That's the reality.
Yeah, so 4,000 tonne in 2015, 400 tonne in 2026. So you're catching 10 times less. I know the price a little bit more, but huge money, a huge loss in those number of years. So then for the likes of ourselves, Dominic, who don't really understand this as to why you can catch so much less. Why are you only allowed to catch so much less now than a number of years ago?
So what we have in Europe is we have this quota management system, which dates back to around when we joined the EU in around 1976, and the first system came in 1982, where all fish stocks have a kind of a proportionality amongst it. So, for instance, for mackerel, we divide the total catch for mackerel that we're allocated between ourselves, the Netherlands, the Germans, the French, the Spanish, and the Danish. So we get a proportion of that catch. Those proportionality keys are set in stone. So if the quota goes up, we get more. But if the quota goes down, we get less. But we always proportionally get the same level. The argument we've always had in the Irish fishing industry is those keys, when they were set when we joined the EU, were set at a very low level. So we've always been at a disadvantage. So we're very much at the whim of the European Commission. We're very much at the whim of science. If stocks go up, then we get a bigger quota. If stocks go down, we get a smaller quota. But our proportionality always stays the same. So it's a hard pill to take when our fishermen see other member states and other non-EU countries fishing to the west of Ireland, for instance, a lot longer with a lot bigger quotas than we do.
Well, say these non-EU countries that we often hear of. I saw an trawlers coming from Norway and fishing off the coast of Ireland. Are these non-EU countries, because they're not under these same constraints, are they overfishing basically, or are they taking more than they should?
Well, the international non-EU countries are a little bit more of a complex situation for stocks like mackerel, which have a very, very wide distribution. So they're distributed from all the way from the Bay of Biscay all the way up to the Arctic Circle. So, other countries have a right to fish them. But what has happened in the recent years is some of these countries, Norway, the Faroes, Iceland, and others, have, instead of following the scientific advice which Europe has always followed, they've set their own sort of unilateral quotas. So if you take it from an example in the old milk quotas, if you've been allocated 100,000 litres of milk to produce in a year, these countries have come along and said, well, we're going to produce 300,000 litres, and good luck to you. So that has caused a big issue. It's a huge annoyance and concern to our own industry, but it's also damaging the stock.
For your own members then, Dominic, who are down to, a handful of days of a catch now with the reduced amount that they are allowed to take in, is it viable? Like, can these fishermen stay going? Well, I mean, it's not all about mackerel for some of our members. They have other fish to catch, but it is a real struggle. They've become, they were always talked about in Killybegs as the mackerel millionaires. I think that's a long gone at this stage. They are, they're still viable, but it is a real struggle. And if there are further cuts, as may happen in the next couple of years, then you will start to see people questioning the logic of staying in the industry. And these are people and families that have been in the industry for 50, 60 years. Yeah, and no more than many different areas of agriculture, supports are looked for then from the government. And you have called on the government to give supports in line with not only monetary, but maybe changing the rules a little that might suit you a bit better?
Yeah, we don't have the same supports as the farming sector has. What we do have is levels of sort of capital support to improve vessels and safety and stuff like that. Given the crisis that we're now facing and given where we are as an industry, we have, been lobbying the government very hard for sort of support packages. The ministers, Minister Hayden, Minister Dooley, have set up a seafood group to look at this, and that's really welcome, but we're in early stages yet. But apart from the financial support, which is obviously what's is needed and is always welcomed, what we do need is to look at the policy that we have that manages the industry. It's difficult to change European policy. We're a small island country. And, European policy is European policy. But there are a lot of national policies currently in fisheries that really breed inefficiency. They're very inflexible. And, a change to those would actually help us in these times, just to, give us a little bit more flexibility in how we catch our fish, what we do with the fish, and just in giving fishermen a chance to plan their year a little bit more than what we have now.
Well, Dominic, it's a tough industry. There's no question about it. Whatever about farming is tough, but you can go in and sleep in your own bed at night. You're not going out to the North Atlantic with the risk, the weather, with everything. And we then hear about fish. It's such a nutritious, good source of food. It's so healthy, and so we're encouraged to eat more and more of it. You would like that the government then would go and encourage it and help your industry. But on the sounds of it, you definitively need help, and hopefully the Seafood Group will bring you some results. I'm going to say many thanks for talking to me here on the programme and giving us a little insight into the world of a fisherman down here in Laois, Offaly and Westmeath. Many thanks, Dominic. Dominic Rehan there from the Killybegs Fishermen Association, KFO. And a really interesting piece there, I have to say, but quotas being the issue, and you can see the non-EU countries are, more or less, they're doing what they want, really, and therein lies the problem. Now, coming up after the break, I am going to be staying on the topic of water, but we're moving from the North Atlantic to the River Barrow in the Midlands here, and we're going to be talking to Ciarán Sheehan about water quality in that area. So stay tuned for that.
Country Life on Midlands 103.
With W.R. Shaw. Looking for the best in farm machinery? We've been supplying top quality New Holland tractors and parts and providing service since 1982. Our expert team is here to keep your farm running smoothly with branches in Tullamore and Carlow. Visit wrshaw.ie today.
And you're very welcome back to Country Life here in Midlands 103. Now, water quality for the last few minutes here of the programme. And we have Ciarán Sheehan from Teagasc. Ciarán, many thanks for taking my call this evening.
Thanks very much for having me, MJ.
You're more than welcome, Ciarán. The River Barrow is the topic of conversation. Tell us what launched today, please.
Yeah, so today we had the Barrow Catchment Action Plan. We launched it in Oak Park in Carlow. And it's a whole industry approach to improving water quality in water bodies in the Barrow where agriculture is the main pressure.
And it is part of the broader aspect, if you will, the 8 actions for change. Ciarán, this is something we've covered here on the programme before. And while some of our listeners may well be in the Barrow catchment area, some may not. But these 8 actions for change, this is something, or these are things that all farmers can do.
Yeah, so what we have part of the campaign is the 8 actions, and they're broken into farmyard management, land management, and nutrient management.
And yes, Ciarán, go ahead.
Yeah, and part of that campaign will be taking the main messages to where they're most needed within the catchment.
And for the Barrow, for example, if there is a listener and he or she is in the catchment area, what happens next, if you will? Will they be contacted by yourselves? Do they have to reach out? How does it work?
So what we do is the Barrow, it covers a large area, 7 counties, and we've broken down the tasks. It's like hygiene elephants, 1 point bit at a time, and we have areas that we'll be working in at the start. And then through the number of years we'll be focusing, broadening out the campaign. So we'll be having farm events, we'll be having, just going out onto discussion groups, local events, and just be asking people when they hear what they're going on, just come and attend and listen and engage with them.
In relation to the aspects then that farmers can do on their own farms, Ciarán, be it in the Barrow catchment or indeed if they're not, are there things, look, this is your area now, catchment coordinator, but are there different things that you see from farm to farm to farm that is a very easy fix that can help with water quality, maybe something that you see regularly that farmers can change their management of that will help water quality in the locality?
I think the main thing is find out where your local monitoring station is, and you can find that in catchments.ie, or if you're in contact with an ASSIP advisor or your advisor, and from there you'll be able to tell if it's either nitrogen reduction or phosphorus and sediment, and is possibly the biggest pressure in the water body, and then both pick from the 8 actions on which of the 8 is most local applicable to reduce your losses.
We are doing good work in relation to water quality, Ciarán, and that was indicative of the nitrates being renewed at the back end of the year, and we're very grateful to have it. But I suppose it's important not to become complacent now. We need to stay working on this.
Yeah, we have to stay working. One thing that we see in the Barrow, and it's across a lot of catchments, is that we're getting water quality improvements. We're also seeing declines in other water bodies. So we need to keep up what we're achieving at good and high status, and start turning the dial on the other ones as well.
Yeah, very good, Ciarán. We're just out of time, but no doubt we'll be speaking to you again in relation to the River Barrow catchment area over the course of the plan. Next 3 or 4 years you're going to be at it. So we will speak to you again here on the programme, and we'll say many thanks for joining me on Country Life.
Thanks very much.
Ciarán Sheehan there from Teagasc, and if you are a farmer in that catchment area, you will be notified, and those 8 actions for change, Look, they're simple ones. They're ones we've talked about before here on the programme. Reducing your fertiliser usage, soil fertility, proper application of fertiliser, slurry storage, management nutrient loss, fencing off water courses, then your riparian margins, your buffer strips, and then green cover to reduce leaching from tillage soils. They're all ones that lots of farmers are doing, a number of them anyway. That is it for this evening's programme. I would like to thank all my guests over the course of the last hour. Very quick programme, I have to say, this evening. Some really interesting guests there over the hour. Thanks to Phelim O'Neill giving us a rundown at the start of the programme on the Middle East. Then we spoke to Mark Costello. He's editor of the Irish Field. And do you remember the 2 tips he gave you? Don't forget them now. It is Joseph O'Brien's Talk the Talk in the first race on Tuesday, the Supreme Novice Hurdle. He's currently 5-1, and I had a quick look at the break there at the other tip. It's Back Me or Sack Me, the last race on Tuesday, and he's currently 7-2. So both of those are worth an each way shot. Fingers crossed one of them comes in, but with any of those tips, please, terms and conditions apply. Very hard to get a winner in Cheltenham, so don't remortgage the farm and put it on either of them, but a small amount, if you will. Also, Dominic Ryan there from the Killybegs Fishermen's Association, organisation, I should say, KFO, giving us a really interesting rundown there on the fishing industry. And lastly, Kieran Sheelan from Chagas about the River Barrow. That is it for this evening's programme. I will be back with you next Wednesday evening as always. Shows repeated on Sunday morning 7am through to 8am, and you can get us wherever you get your podcasts. If you type in MJ space Clery, Clery, we will pop up and you can listen at your leisure. Spotify, Google, Apple and YouTube. We will speak to you in 7 days' time. Enjoy Cheltenham if you get to watch a race or two, and hopefully one of those horses comes in. We'll see you in a week.